So, guys, I have to share a story with you from long, long ago that just popped into my brain. I remember way back, like 20 years ago, maybe even 21 years ago, when I very, very first started this, and I was in my very first prep. Um, I owned the local gym, and people would come to me for training and for instruction and things like this. And naturally, I didn't look like the normal person. I was pretty shredded at the time, and I was getting ready for my first competition. And I remember vividly having this high and mighty attitude. And I look back at it and I kind of grit my teeth and I cringe a little bit because I'm like, how could I have been so, freaking arrogant? Because I remember people would be like, you look great. What do you need to lose more weight? And I'm like, you don't even know. I look great compared to the average person. I'm gonna be standing on stage next to bodybuilders that are gonna be just as lean as me, or not leaner. Or they're gonna be bigger than me. You don't know what you're talking about. Just leave me alone. And they're like,
You said leave me alone?
uh, basically.
Damn, Brad, you're ruthless back then.
And it was basically because I was arrogant, for lack of a better term. It's people would see me weighing my food, on the counter there at the gym and like, what are you doing? And I'm like, you have no idea. You don't understand. And I see like old documentaries and old Netflix type documentaries of bodybuilders that acted the same way that I did way back then. I mean, it kind of pisses me off. I'll be like, how can you be so arrogant? How could you be that way to your mother and your father that are housing yourself, and you're treating them like they're idiots, because you do this thing that is something you love, but is not, it's not the normal thing, right? But yeah, that popped into my head the other day, and it made me, how you start going around in your head and you're thinking about all the things that you went through and how it's changed to today and how different things are today. But I look back at myself back then and I'm like, I just cringe. I'm like, Brad, man, thank goodness the internet didn't exist back then.
Did you look at, like, muscle magazines? Where did you get your information back then?
It was kind of that transitionary period where it was like, okay, the early 90s and having the magazines of Muscle and Fitness and Iron Man, and all of those, that was where I originally got my information in the early 90s. And so this was right in that transitionary period, about 1999 to 2004, where it was kind of like those were getting less. They were still there, but they were getting less and less popular because now it's kind of like we've got the bodybuilding.com forums, and we've got these different online ways of getting information. And way back then, of course, internet was in its infancy, right? There was no Instagram. I didn't learn about Facebook until like 2008 or 2009. So it was right in that window when like the social media boom didn't really exist yet, but we were kind of starting to phase out from the subscription to Iron Man magazine every month to getting this free information online through the bodybuilding.com forums, and kind of ways like that. So does that answer your question, I
Yeah,
hope,
no, it
on what
does,
you were trying to get at?
because I was similar. I didn't prep for until after the internet was in existence, but I do remember, like, magazines marketed things in a way that sort of romanticized the hardcore mentality, like, the hardcore process of it all. Like, they're not gonna sell magazines by, like, preaching balance, and so when I first got into it and kind of committed, like, okay, I'm gonna do this bodybuilding thing, it was, yeah, I have similar, cringy moments when I look back on them. But it was like it's like the old Animal Pack ads, you see the guy, like, in his dingy basement, and it's like he's spending all his money on tuna fish and like that was like what you sort of, like, in my head back then, it's like, this is kind of what success looks like in this for this sport. But, as we've all matured, as we've gotten older in the sport and competing, like, it it's the polar opposite now. Um, but I almost like back then sort of embraced the isolation of it all in a way. And I think now with social media, it's easier, but it's also still difficult because there's like a stigma attached to bodybuilding, you know? And I think there's some of it I honestly I think is warranted because I think a lot of people manage things in a way that's pretty selfish, but I also think that having that community online helped me tremendously when I first got into the sport. The bodybuilding.com forums, may they rest in peace. They were they were huge. Like those, and I've always been pretty introverted, and like I had a thread on there, but like I learned a lot just lurking and you know picking up information where I could, and seeing people in similar situations as myself. But at the time too, I also remember like still wanting that in-person connection and finding like the first gym where I had a
Where were
good
you
training
training?
partner.
Like when you first started, where were you training at?
Like the school, well, like rec centers. The rec
So
center that
Was there
it,
anybody that was even
no, it
remotely
was like I had
close
one
to
of my
your
close
level
friends
of
that was kind of into it, and but yeah, and like once school started, it was yeah, just kind of the rec center gym at the university, and like there was a decent atmosphere there, but not like there is in like a bodybuilding gym. Um, and even sometimes those can be not the best environment depending on which one you go to, but yeah, so like training environment, it's changed pretty significantly for me over time. I train mostly at home now, but I can go into a gym and still, not have many conversations, but still get a lot out of just being around that environment, being around people with similar goals. I think that helps a lot. But um, yeah, I was fortunate enough to start with like a decent training partner. So a very good training partner. But yeah, over time, it's like I can see how it can be isolating as you progress across your career for sure.
Were you married at the time when you first started or no?
No, no, I was like 18, 17, 16, but then like
Okay.
bodybuilding, like early 20s.
What did your parents think of it?
Um, I don't really think it was, I think they saw me working out and they're like, oh, that's cool. But then like the first bodybuilding show I did, like I remember my dad going to it and he was just like,
What the heck is this?
yeah, he's like, what was with that pose down at the end? He's like, you guys looked like a bunch of little spiders dancing around up there. Just like, all right. And so, yeah, they were supportive, but they still weren't. Yeah, they didn't know what the hell was going on, um, and
Like,
to some degree still don't. But
yeah.
they understand it's something that's important to
Like
me.
when I
And
first started, I was 14
yeah,
and I took my stepdad's plastic weight set, put it in my room, but at the same, he didn't lift it. It was just, there was
just
dust all
there.
over it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just there. So I dragged it in there. I put it in there and I go in there every day after school and lift. Well, he was frustrated. Like he would give me a hard time. Like you should be working your brain, not your body. And he'd tell me, you need to watch Wall Street. Cause back then MTV was a big thing, right? Come home
yeah,
from school, you watch music videos. That was the thing.
yeah.
So I'm sitting there watching that type of stuff. And he's like just razzing me, giving me a hard time. So it felt like I was doing something wrong by lifting weights. I mean, fast forward many, many years later, he kind of got it because he was a fence contractor, ran his own business, and then now all of a sudden he's seeing me like do something with this bodybuilding thing. Like, oh, you're actually starting a business with
Mm.
some other guys and doing something productive with it. But in his brain back then was like, this is just totally counterproductive. And same thing, like me, like when I started competing, like him seeing me in a Speedo was like, no way. Like he's just like, for him, that just seemed feminine. Like, what are you doing? So it was really a struggle with some of my family. My dad was supportive with it because my dad lifted weights. He was into it, but I didn't live with my dad. So I didn't have that support system,
Yeah.
pretty much around me all the time. So it did feel isolating
Just
at
out of the
times
gate.
back then. Yep.
Interesting. Yeah.
Vlad, that was what I was just going to jump into, is that I felt totally misunderstood. And of course, then I would get defensive, because I remember vividly, like, I didn't see my parents and when I started my first like official prep was in 2003. And I had not seen my parents in like a really long, I had seen my family in like a really long time. It'd been like 8 months or like just about a year. And so I get to see them
They thought you were dying.
right in the middle of exactly. That was exactly. They
Oh
were
my
like,
gosh,
"Brad,
my boy is
are you
dying.
okay? You're looking very sickly."
Yeah.
And I think that was the term. It was sickly.
Oh, Brad, when I got told that by everybody, I was like, yes, it's working.
I'm not sick. I'm shredded.
Yeah. Well, and I just felt so misunderstood. It was like, you don't understand. I'm trying to do something that, and at the time, keep in mind, in my mind, this little world that I had been living in, because I owned the gym, right? And so I was telling everybody what I was doing. And then I'm trying to pass on all these training principles and all this stuff. And I was holding challenges for the local community on weight loss. I would do it every year. That was kind of like my big revenue builder. Every year was January 1st. We're starting the Healthy Body Challenge, And I got to the point to where I kind of thought that was normal. And it was such a kind of almost like a wake-up call when you would get out in the real world, which is where, like 90%, 95% of the population actually lives, and they'd have no idea what it is that you're doing, which is the majority of the people. It was like, "Oh, wow, I am kind of living in my own little bubble here." You know what I mean? In this little town where I own this gym. So yeah, that was the only way I could really describe it, was just misunderstood. And then of course I would get defensive and then just get on my high horse in my soapbox. Um, because yeah, I made my world that lifestyle in a way. And so then when I got outside of that lifestyle, when I got outside of that bubble, which I mean, let's face it, that is the majority of the world, period. This bodybuilding thing that we do, even like even as popular as just fitness is right now, it's still a small percentage of the population.
Especially
It really
competitors.
is.
Like, even though that's
Mhm.
growing. Going through a prep and being fit aren't the same thing, and
Yep. Yep.
so a lot of people can relate to the fitness side, but then when it comes time to prep, they're like, understandably, most people have no interest in going through that.
No.
And
I mean, going back to like my mom thinking I was ready to die, like to me, that was a stressor because it doesn't matter how I try to angle it as far as what I'm doing, she's not going to comprehend it. And even if she does comprehend it, she's not going to accept it because obviously she's seeing me like it's not, I mean, it's not normal to be 6% body fat. I mean, it is kind of a shock when your parents see their kid with sunken cheeks, clothes falling off of them. But it is a stressor, or it was not anymore, but it was a stressor for me to go in those type of environments where it's like, okay, I gotta go see family, relatives, or I gotta go out to eat with people because now it's like, man, I'm gonna get, not only do I have to maybe explain what I do, and that's gonna require a ton of energy, but then also too, it's like all the attention's on me, and I'm an introvert by nature, so to have all that attention on me, it's stressful. Like, I just like, just leave me alone. I just wanna have my Diet Coke, I'll have another salad, just I don't need to explain why I'm just having a salad, but like you said, Brad, like most of the people out there, it's like, that's not normal.
Yeah.
So it's like,
It's so fun.
it is, it can be very isolating in a way from the real world, the things that we have to do in order to get in contest shape. I mean,
And it's so funny
our
how
practices are better nowadays, like, because back then I was very restrictive, like very restrictive of like the things I ate, and walking around with water bottles and, doing all this quote unquote bodybuilding stuff that does look weird to the common person.
Hmm. And it's so funny how this same subject, this same thing that we're talking about, it feels different and people react differently based on their personality type. Because even though, like I would say, leave me alone, I actually wanted people to ask me, hey, Brad, why are you eating lettuce with hot sauce on top of it? Well, let me tell you, like literally, because I am so extroverted,
That's
like
like
when
my
I took
worst
that
nightmare.
Myers. Oh, I know. Yeah. And for me, it was the exact opposite. I mean, I'm so extroverted on that Myers Briggs thing. I think I was like 28 E and like one I, that's how extroverted I am. So yeah, I almost like strived for people to ask me, because I just wanted to tell them, and again, it was kind of that it fed my ego. And back then, Brad's ego was not a nice thing. It was very, like I said, it makes me cringe when I look back at it now. But just think about how differently this same topic that we're talking about, Jeff, it was you and Brian, it was like the worst thing that you could be asked. And back then, for me, it was like, bring it. You know what I mean? Let me get in the pulpit
Wait,
and start
You know
preaching.
what's interesting? You know what's interesting, Brad, is that I don't even like explaining my macros or any of this stuff to other bodybuilders. Like if we go somewhere socially, like I walk into like a, post show or whatever, like you go to dinner, it's like everybody's talking about their macros. I'm like, can we talk about your kids or maybe talking about like, what's going on in the world? Maybe like, do we have to talk about macros, what your macros are and how much cardio you're doing? And so it's almost weird, like, you're wanting, like, to talk about it, and I'm on the
Hmm.
opposite side of the spectrum.
Yep. Yep. And it's literally the opposite side. Like you have to be kind of like coaxed into talking about that. Me, I have to be the opposite. And I have to talk myself down to not talk about it. You know what I mean? It's like, Brad, people don't care about your macros. People don't care what your cardio regimen. People don't care that you do this thing that you think is cool online. Just chill and just, oh yeah, just nod and wave, you know? I have to suppress that.
I try to be understanding too, depending on if I'm talking to one of my athletes, it's their first show or something, I'm gonna be, okay, I'm gonna talk bodybuilding with them because obviously it's all new to them, but that's my personality is like I remember like here's a story. So it's when I first met Eric and Alberto, and we were at Eric's house. I don't know if it was after a show or it was like one of the weekend functions, get-togethers in the early stages of 3D Muscle Journey. I get in there, and there's a bunch of people in there, and it's almost like the most popular question was, "What's your macros?" And they were just going nuts, like just talking about body. And to me, I was not that I was repulsed, but I was almost like just watching how obsessed each person was and how, like, so in tune to their bodybuilding they were. It I think the reason I feel this way is because when I first started out, I was like that. It and kinda like you, Brad, like, I didn't, like, project it on people, but if someone asked, then I would like, "Okay, if someone's asked me, 'Why aren't you eating food? You're just having a salad.'" I'm gonna explain everything to them. So, I would happily kinda get into that conversation, but I got just seeing how that was for some people, it can come across as like this guy is just totally self-absorbed. He's just all into his bodybuilding stuff. And so that's what it kind of just it reminded me like walking into Eric's house and everybody's just kind of talking about their own macros and how many sets they're doing. It's like, man, can we talk about the World Series or something?
The irony in that too is, I think to the average person, if you're starting out and you're very eager to explain things to people, it almost comes across even more self-absorbed because they you don't have as much to show for it yet. It's like you're in your early stages. It's like this kid is just like talking nonstop about bodybuilding, but then as soon as as you progress, you start to not want to do that, but then more people might see like, okay, this guy's good at what he does. I respect his work ethic and they want to ask questions. And then you almost feel like it feels sort of wrong talking about it at that point. It feels more self-absorbed at that point, even though there's more interest on the other side, I think. So yeah, I don't know. It's tough though. It's a tough thing to navigate, especially as you're getting into the sport.
When so many young people come to us really with that fervor that we had, that zest for they wanna do this thing, you know? And I remember vividly, like you said, Brian, seeing the Animal Pack ad and seeing all my idols, and I was like, "Man, I wanna live that life," you know? That suits me right there, you know? And so, yeah, we get these young people that come to, and not of them just young, but just new to the sport, and they're like me, that I wanna live that life, and then they kinda find out real quickly that no one else wants to do it. You know, no one else wants to weigh their food. You know, no one else wants to train to failure. No one else wants to do cardio to get lean and expend calories. And they all of a sudden they're like, well, wait a minute. This thing's not as cool as I thought it was. I still love it, but nobody wants to do it with me, you know? And so they almost kind of start to strive for belonging to something, you know? And, that's a tough thing to kind of coach people through. And sometimes I think that the impulse buyers that are out there looking for coaching, and they kind of click something thinking, "Okay, I'm gonna be part of this community. I want these guys to coach me." And then 2 months later, they're not wanting to do coaching anymore because they didn't get what it was that they wanted. They didn't get that community, you know, that they were after. They just kinda found out, well, it's just these two people. One's kind of the instructor and the other one's kind of following through, and they don't get that sense of belonging, you know?
That's
And
because
that's because I mean, I'm sure you guys get that
bodybuilding's
too.
24/7 if you think about it.
It really is,
Like,
yes.
especially if you're contest prepping, everything you do from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep has to
Until
do with
literally you go to
something.
sleep.
Like, everything you're
Mhm.
doing has to be, it's almost like you're catering towards, like, the end result. You're thinking about, like, if you're, "Okay, I'm gonna go play hoops once a week." It's like, "Okay, I go play for 2 hours and I'm done." But bodybuilding is 24/7, and then so even if you have a coach, it's like you're interacting with the coach, you know, maybe once a day, once a week, whatever the amount is, but what are you doing the other 23 hours and 30 minutes or 23 hours of the day? It's like, who are you surrounding yourself with? When I was prepping before the internet, like my coworkers probably like I probably drove them nuts because I work on the assembly line at the auto plant. So you're literally paired up with somebody for 2.5 hour stretches. And it's like you know their life, right? You know their life, they know my life. It's like we're talking about the same thing every day. It's like, what are you gonna do today? But well, after I get off work, I'm gonna go hit legs. I'm gonna do 2 sets of hack squats. I'm gonna push that thing to failure. I'm gonna try to add another plate in there. It's like you're just like talking like that for 2.5
You're
hours.
like, "That's great. You're not gonna microwave fish in the microwave again."
So exactly, yeah. It's almost lunch. Are you gonna put the are you opening the damn tuna can again,
Yeah,
Brian?
yeah.
So it's like day in and day out. Like, 'cause that's the my little circle that I was around. So it's like, man, I imagine I must have drove some of those people just absolutely bonkers.
Hey, 3DMJers. This is Andrea Valdez popping in to let you know all about 5 of our free courses that you can take inside the 3DMJ Vault. For those who don't know, the 3DMJ Vault is our all-in-one video-based education platform for bodybuilders, powerlifters, and serious lifters of all types. It's essentially a place where we house and organize all our best information in hopes of creating our ideal future 3DMJ athlete or future physique or strength competitor. In total, there are over 25 video courses in the vault, and it continues to grow every year since we started it in 2017. If you want to sign up to be a VIP member, you can make a one-time purchase to access every single one of those courses at any time. But if you're not ready for that just yet, we do have 5 free courses that can help you learn some key concepts and give you a feel for what our courses are like. The first free course most people start with is the Vault Quick Start Guide, which lays out our suggested order of learning for lifters depending on where you are in your training career and what goals you have at any time. The second free course is our most recent release, the Pro Bodybuilder Case Study. And in that one, Coach Brad Loomis walks you through a 3-year contest prep planning arc with one of his pro bodybuilders who also competes in powerlifting. He'll show you progress photos, spreadsheets, and all that good stuff along the way. Thirdly, one of our more popular free video courses is the Recovery Diet. And in it, you'll have Dr. Eric Helms teach you how we have our dieting athletes exit their contest prep phases and return to the off-season in the most efficient manner possible. That one also includes a PDF download and recovery diet calculator made by Coach Brian Miner as well. And our 2 final free vault courses were each created by one of our 2 team's specialists. We have the Sustainable Fat Loss course by our registered dietitian, Steve Taylor, and the Blood Flow Restriction Training course by our injury reduction and management specialist, Dr. Nick Licamelli. You can become a free Vault member and get all 5 of those free courses by signing up at 3dmjvault.com. Just pick your free course and click Enroll Now to get started. Again, that's 3dmjvault.com to sign up and become a free or VIP member. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the rest of the show.
I think, looking back at my first prep, it's felt significantly more isolating than, the preps after. And I tell a lot of people, like, the best hunger hack during prep is just to stay busy with other stuff. And so I think if you're too obsessive and it's like you're the only part of your world, it feels significantly more self-isolating because you're just waiting around for your next meal, rather than going out and building relationships outside of the sport. And like one thing, I've tried to do, I feel like I've done an okay job at is, I've got friends outside of bodybuilding, that give me playfully give me shit, about like, competing. And like a lot of it's fun. Like it's weird. Like I can respect the fact that to the normal person, the rest of society, like the sport it's different. But I think a lot of them have realized like over the years, like it's what gives him fulfillment. It's not so much like an attention seeking project, but more so this is how he pushes himself and finds fulfillment. And I think when you look at it that way, it's easier to explain to people. Like I always tell, I know I'm probably a little bit different in this regard, but like the posing and the stuff, like I like the process of prep. The competing, like I'm learning to appreciate it more and more. But like for lack of better words, like the pageantry of bodybuilding, I've never liked. And that's something like I've always sort of guarded a little bit, I think, when I talk about it to other people. And so I'm always kind of quick to point out, like, yeah, it's different. If they say, is that when you go up and you flex in a Speedo or whatever, it's like, well, it's more about the process for me. Like it's just a large project that I get a lot of fulfillment and has like residual carryover into other parts of my life. But then as you get more into the sport, you start to realize like the competing side of it's fun. Like there's areas to refine there. And I know that's definitely true for me. So that's kind of become a more appreciated part of the sport for me, but it's still very much like the journey is the reward for me rather than getting on stage.
Like some people, like I used to get this a lot where people would say, you're getting up there in a Speedo. That's weird, right? And I wrote a blog when we first started 3D Muscle Journey, like within the first year or 2, I wrote a blog specifically on this. It's really no different. When you get up there and you're expressing your art is what you're doing. It's no different than going to an art gallery and everybody's looking at these paintings. Like it's the same concept. That's how I kind of look at it. So for me, that's how I kind of describe it to some people who kind of look at it. Now, like my stepdad was one who was like, to him, it was just super weird to see someone up there in their underwear. Like he didn't get it. Like, why are you doing that? What's the point of that? And he ended up getting cancer. And his, like it was maybe a year before he passed, I said, come down and see my show. So he actually drove down from Oregon to California. It was the first time he ever went to a show because actually the second time. The first time he got weirded out by seeing me up there. So he wasn't really paying too much attention. And that was maybe like 11 years prior. So he came and I dedicated my routine to him and all that. And he totally got it afterwards, after that. Because he saw past that part of it. He actually saw the fact that, because he kind of followed my journey. Actually, he was paying attention to what I was actually doing through the process, kind of like you were saying, like going through all that training, pushing myself. Because I went up there to visit him a few times during the prep and I was like sticking to my diet. And so I think it just kind of registered when he was actually there. I get why he's going through this process. And I've had athletes too, that same thing. It's like they almost feel isolated, alienated by their own family, not getting supported because they're doing this crazy endeavor. And I kind of just tell them, like, because they'll express it like, hey, my wife's uncomfortable with this. She's kind of complaining about it. I'm like, is she going to go to the show? He's like, she'll go. I go, wait, when she sees you up on stage, I guarantee you she's going to get it and she's going to appreciate it afterwards. And almost 9 times out of 10, that's usually what happens.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I know my wife. I mean, none of us married competitors, so I think it's I mean, for me, it's worked out, I think, favorably in that regard, because I think it kind of anchors me, like keeps one foot in the door of like, this is what normal behavior is, rather, because, and not to say that like, the fit couples, that's a bad thing, but it's easier, if somebody's like looking to, find someone like-minded within, this space with similar hobbies. Like you don't always need that. I think that's important too. Like if you're into bodybuilding, you don't need to find your significant other at the gym, and like, so I know that's something that, I've gotten questions about in the past. But yeah, I mean, it did, like my wife, she was able to, the first part of the process, it's kind of like, this is strange, but like, I can see what you're doing. Like, this is like good discipline. Like, she respected the hard work, and like each season it got, better from there. But, it's still a sacrifice for everybody, at the end of the day. Like it's a process. So I think she's supportive, but it's like, I need to pick my spots when it's something I want to actually go through with. But I mean, Brad, how was Jamie when you first competed?
Well, and that's the interesting thing that you bring that up, Brian, because the I wasn't a bodybuilder when we met.
Yeah, I wasn't
I
either.
mean, when Jamie and I got married, and keep in mind that I'm a very emotional, passionate, like addictive person. When I get into something and I really love it, I bail my whole soul into that, what I am doing. And so when we met, that was auto racing. Stock car racing was my passion. And so when we met, I mean, she would get lonely because I was always leaving, going to the shop to work on my car and prepare it for race day, and she loved going to the races. She loved watching me race, but she would get just kind of put off by all the time that I spent preparing the car. So, we meet, we get married, I'm doing this racing thing. We move away from where we lived back then, and racing's no longer kind of part of my life anymore. It's kind of one of those deals where it's like, this is really friggin' expensive and I can't really afford it, because the more competitive you are, the more money you spend on it. And so I become this person now. And it was so funny because she was the one that made me realize the kind of person, the personality type I am. She goes, you're no different now than you were when you were racing. It's the same thing. It's just a different hobby
endeavor.
now.
Yeah.
So naturally, I become this person now that is, back then we didn't really have macros. I made a menu. I followed it every single day. Every Sunday was prep day, prepped all my meals, put it in Tupperware containers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, for her, it wasn't as, I guess, alarming as it might be if your significant other becomes this person, because it was the same personality type. It was just a different sport.
Yeah.
You know? So I guess I was kind of lucky in that regard. But then, of course, she had to put up with the Brad that, wants to tell everybody about this thing that he does. Which is Jeff, and I'll let you kind of share your story, because you've got kind of two
I got
different
two different.
outward perspectives
Well,
in a
I have an
way.
ex-wife and a now new wife. A new
Yeah,
wife.
yeah.
So it's almost like I approach bodybuilding differently. Because back then with my first wife, I was the animal pack ad. Everything was hardcore. Everything had to be a Tupperware. I would literally say I'm not going out to eat. I was that guy, and that caused a lot of friction. You should have family come flying out from like Philadelphia. We're going out to dinner. Like, I'm not going. And it would be an argument. I'm like, well, I'm just going to sit there. I'm not going to eat nothing. I'm going to be miserable. So I'm not going to go. So I was an asshole like you, Brad. I'm so glad the internet didn't exist back then, because I was literally that egotistical, self-absorbed bodybuilder, because it was like, especially when I got into competing, because it was all about winning. And what's interesting is back then it was like local shows. There was no pro cards or any of that stuff. Like, I'm just trying to get a first place, a trophy, maybe get my name in a local newspaper like that. And so it's crazy how I was back then, but there's still a lot of bodybuilders like that. Even though they're, flexible dieting exists, all the science exists, and we know we're not going to lose muscle, by missing a workout or having one meal out. It's like nothing negative is going to happen, but that's how my mentality was. So I didn't bend for anybody. I expected everybody to bend for me.
That was the way I was. Same thing.
Just so self-centered, self-absorbed, and I'm not proud of it at all. It was ugly. And that's why as a coach now, it's like now I stress balance. And I know there's a lot of people out there go, that doesn't exist. If you're going to get on stage, especially if you're going to WWF Worlds or something like that, you got to be hardcore. It's like you're going to sacrifice. Like, yes, you're going to sacrifice, but I learned how to manage my energies and my priorities. I learned to become, in a sense, flexible. And I mean, it was night and day difference between, my ex-wife and how I live now. And, when I first met my wife now, I remember it's like our first or second date. And she's like, what do you do? And it's that question, like, what do you do for a living, right? We were talking about this before we started the podcast. Like, that's the question we all like, oh gosh, the normal people are going to ask us, what do we do for a living? We had to tell them we're a bodybuilding coach, because you have to over-explain everything. So I was like really hesitant about telling her what I did. So what I did is I just got my laptop out, opened up the computer, went to 3dmusclejourney.com and said, I just showed her the website. And she looks at it, she's like, so what do you do? I'm like, okay, I'm a bodybuilding coach. And she's like, okay. I go, and yeah, I'm really not, because, in my mind, I'm thinking, because of my experience with my first wife, like she was just repulsed by the whole bodybuilding scene, because just the way I was. So I'm like, she's probably going to think the same thing. And she just said, she's like, I'm not trying to change you. And I'm like, ooh, she's a keeper. Like I kind of knew. So basically, over time, she got more acquainted with what I actually did for a living, the things that I had to do. So for her, from the get-go, the expectation was, this is his job. He loves to train. It's part of his life, and it is what it is. So I had to, like, once we got more serious and, of course, we ended up living together, then eventually getting married. Over time, I've learned to become more flexible based on the environment, meaning, moving training sessions around if needed, being a little more flexible with eating out and things like that. And, in a sense, becoming more experienced in having more education as far as how to manipulate, and manage training and nutrition. So in a sense, I learned to become very practical and not so like I didn't have to have things so black or white. And it just allowed me to become more sustainable with things. And that's what I try to coach now. It's like I'm really strong about like the word balance. It's not that I think there is true balance, but it just means like it doesn't have to be hardcore like a certain way. And that's how I coach. I coach more based off practicality and sustainability than I do like, hey bro, you need to get 9 sets for biceps this week. You have to do that. That's optimal.
And when you talk about coaching, a bodybuilding coach, right? I I have a hard time trying to get across to because whenever you say, okay, I'm a coach, I'm a bodybuilding coach, I'm a powerlifting coach, people don't really understand that because what they picture is they picture Tom Landry. What they picture is, the coaches on the basketball court, and the football field and the hockey rink. Is that right, Brian? The hockey rink, or is it the hockey arena?
Both can apply.
But that's what they picture when they picture a coach. So then naturally they're like, oh, well, you take people through their training, you take people through their workouts, you're there, kind of calling audibles and things like that. And it's like, well, no, not that's not what we do. Just trying to explain what a bodybuilding coach is that is what I don't look forward to.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll get the question like, it's like, I'm a trainer for, like, sometimes I'll say, like, I'm a personal trainer. And then I've sort of learned not to say that anymore because then the follow up question is always like, so you
Mhm.
just
Oh,
like Skype with them while they work out? It's like, no, that would be weird. But yeah, it's more like consulting in a way. It's like fitness consulting.
You know what's
But
interesting
it
though?
is a tough profession to explain.
Like my wife is a special education teacher for, for pre-K. And a lot of the things that she does in her profession, her job, is very similar to what we do. A lot of the principles and concepts. So sometimes with people, I'll explain I'm a bodybuilding coach, and if I have to go into depth, I kind of use like her example. Like her and I kind of we do the similar things. It's just a different population or different clientele. So it's like the word coach, Brad, like you said, it's almost like people just think X's and O's. So in our field, it's like I'm assigning these macros or I'm giving you step counts or I'm creating a training program, which is true, but it's also mentoring and talking about things like we're talking in this podcast. Cause what you're trying, like what I try to do with people is to try to make their environment it's real life. Like I'm trying to make their environment in a way to where they can execute the bodybuilding world really well without at the same time they're navigating the real world, whether it's work, jobs, relations, all that stuff ties into what we're doing in the gym and with contest prep especially. Like that can have an impact both ways. And I think that's where, I mean, not to toot our own horn, but I'm going to do it anyway, is that we have tons of real world experience. So, like, I kind of ask myself this, like, if I was to look for a coach, what would I want out of a coach if I'm going to do a contest prep? And I'm not saying that a younger person can't do the job, but if someone, let's say they're 21 years old, they've gone through one contest prep, like someone for myself, I don't think that's going to be the person that's going to coach me. I think it's going to be someone who's been in the trenches for a very long time, is a world traveler. It's been around the block a few times. They have plenty of experience, not just with bodybuilding, but life itself, because I want them to understand what I go through, like what my life is like.
Yeah.
I probably
No,
went a little too deep there, but
No, I agree. I think, especially in a prep, like it's managing people more so than it is the X's and O's, and guiding them to the finish line and trying to keep like nurture a healthy state of mind throughout the process. And that takes experience, like both like the coach needs to go through that experience to be able to kind of help, navigate through that. So I definitely get what you're saying and I agree.
because it's like if you have an athlete that's going through entire prep and they've been alienating themselves, like they're the hard, like I did, they're the hardcore mentality. Like they could be destroying relationships. They could be like failing at their job or something just because they don't have their priorities in order, or even vice versa. Like maybe their family's alienating them. They don't understand what they're going through. Because maybe the athlete's not communicating. Hey, this is the reason. Like someone like Brad. Like, hey, I'm gonna let everybody know what I'm doing. Maybe this person's not doing that. So there's more to it than just like, hey, your macros and your protein and your sets here, sets there.
I remember one time I was, because a lot of times I take my work with me. I have a hard time taking days off from coaching because it is something that I really love doing. And I was up at home with my parents, and a lot of times my parents, they're really good about like giving me their little office, and I kind of move in there. But there was one time it seems like
It's
I
your
was.
mama's boy, Brad.
Oh, I am. There's no doubt about it. I'm the oldest. I am a mama's boy. So, yeah, for sure. But I remember I was making a coaching video for somebody, and I don't remember exactly what it was, the topic that I was coaching, but it had nothing to do with macros. It had nothing to do with the X's and O's. It had nothing to do with training. And I almost kind of want to say that it was something about navigating um, a person's nutrition throughout the day, I want to say. I think that's what it was. But it might have been like you said, Jeff. I might have been coaching them up on, okay, I understand your wife doesn't really understand this thing and you're looking to undertake this bodybuilding thing. You got to let your significant other and your wife know what you're about to do and kind of get their buy-in and ask for their support and, et cetera, et cetera. It might have been that, but I can't remember exactly what the topic was. But my point is my dad, when I got done with that and I sent the video off, my dad was just looking at me with this big grin on his face and he goes, "That is coaching." And it literally had nothing to do with the spreadsheets and the X's and the O's and things like that. And it's just kind of, reinforcing, Jeff, what you were talking about. A lot of times this coaching thing that we do is just as much life experience, having not only us living in the trenches, but then seeing possibly thousands by this time. I don't really know. It's probably more like hundreds and hundreds, but still navigating all of these scenarios of all these different relationships and ways of doing business, life experience, and then passing that on to our clients so that they are able to navigate things and put things into their life, into their perspective. But yeah, that's when I talk about coaching and how hard it is for us to explain what it is when we're doing a bodybuilding coach. It's it's not just, okay, your alignment, the play is going to go this way. Here's how you get your head play side. Or, okay, you're a guard. This is how you guard this particular play. It's more like that, but it's more like real life in a way. Okay, you got to go out to dinner. Here's how you're going to navigate that. You know what I mean? It's kind of that kind of coaching it's almost like the part that is the most exhausting to explain to people, but it's such a big part of it.
What's cool is, like the seminars that we've done in the past, like, of course we have our presentations. Like you do your hour-long presentation on a certain subject, and then by the end of the day, everybody's kind of like their heads are sliding down. They're getting tired, from listening to all these presentations. And then at the end, we do a Q&A.
And they perk
They
up.
perk up,
Mhm.
they ask questions, and then all of a sudden, it all becomes real. It's all about real life because now they get to see us as human, just like they're human. And the questions they typically ask are going to pertain to how they navigating the things that we're talking about into the real world. So that to me is like, it's just for me, that's the part of this sport I enjoy the most is just the interaction, it's just the real interactions. And, because you get to learn people's personalities. Like you said, Brett, some people are like you, they're more extroverted. Some people are like me and Brian, they're more introverted. But you can learn a ton just by having a normal, like our one-on-ones, video calls.
Mhm.
It's interesting how people's perception, especially with the social media, like, cause I'll get the typical questions like how many sets this person on, this person's post said this person post said that, this person says this. And then when I start breaking it down one-on-one with the person, I'm like, no, a lot of the stuff you're taking in does not even apply to you at all. At all. And it's almost like I have to explain to some people, like sometimes people online, they're not, it's not really them. It's like they're putting stuff out there that whether it's business related or what, it's not like real. It's not 100% real. And that's what frustrates me personally about social media. I just feel like it's people have lost there's like a disconnect depending on what platform you're on. It's hard to have like a normal one-on-one conversation with somebody on Instagram unless you're in the DMs with somebody.
Well, sometimes it's not only not real, it's whoever they look up to. They're trying to be the person that they're watching, or they're trying to portray
True.
themselves as their idol. You know what I mean? And that's one thing that I've kind of learned that for myself, from way back when, I found me trying to portray myself like my mentors and coaches and people that I looked up to. And it kind of took a good old fashioned kind of grab the face mask moment with Alberto to realize, hey, Brad, you know what? You're a weird dude, but that's what draws people to you. Be the weird dude. Just do it. That is be real. That is what's going to draw
He
people
was
to
telling you
you,
to be yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Don't try to be somebody else and don't try to suppress who it is that you are. Be you, you know? And that I know exactly what you're talking about, Jeff, when you're talking about this portrayal of people that's not real. And you got to like make the people that we're coaching and that we're you kind of mentoring. You not only got to tell them, look, that's probably not who they really are. Number two, even if that was who they really are, that's not you. And you don't need to be doing what they are doing.
Yeah, I think with social media in particular, it's I open Instagram and it almost feels like a debate platform more than it is like a community, and my passion comes from like providing assistance that's going to help people in some way. And I think sometimes it comes across online, like when you scroll through Instagram, it's like, is this person wanting, is their root reason for putting this out there to help people get better? Or are they trying to impose like themselves as an authority on the topic, and
Mhm.
are they
They
feeding
want
their
to
own
prove
ego
themselves
through
right. Yep.
content? And so I've always struggled with that because I never want to come across that way. But almost to a fault, I think. But it is, yeah, the social media landscape now it's it's very superficial as a whole, in my opinion. But there's also a lot of good information out there as long as you know how to practically apply it, which I think is what we do a good job at, within the landscape of somebody's life, because all of the free content is out there. Most of the people, they come to us if you told them like, okay, I want to see you write yourself a training split, and I haven't done this, but if you were to just instruct somebody like, hey, why don't you, I want to see what you come up with. Chances are it's going to be sound enough that if they just stuck with it, like they would get pretty solid results. It's like there's rarely is there going to be something so far out in left field that it's like, okay, let's scrap this and start from ground zero. So I think it's learning to get people to put the big rocks in place, which takes time and experience, but it also streamlines things considerably. Um, it's kind of like yeah, it's you start out as a coach and you kind of embrace the finer details of things because you think it sort of separates like, okay, this is what's going to push people to the next level. But I mean, Jeff, you're a great testament to the fact, and I mentioned this to a lot of my athletes. I'm like, just get the work in consistently. Like it doesn't need to be perfect. You know, if you miss a training session or have to delay it, like that's fine. Like just find let's put together a well thought out program for you. It's not going to be perfect. We never know if what we're putting together is 100% optimal, but like it will steer you in the right direction if we can find a way that you can stay consistent with this over time. Um, and I think, yeah, like you said, a lot of people come to us asking those questions, and I think they don't really expect coming out of the conversation with what they get in a way, which I think is a good thing. You know, I try to address the questions that they have, but at the same time also point out that maybe these details don't matter as much as they think.
Well, you would
Well, and
wouldn't
the
you
whole
think though, like someone like myself who's been, and all of us really, because I've been training. You know, next month will be 39 years for me. It's
That's
mind
awesome.
boggling. But imagine, like
bravo.
like, would you program me like, okay, this guy's got to be advanced. He needs an advanced program. Like this needs to be something super magical because he's been in the gym for so long. But I've literally have made a living off of intermediate programming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because what's advanced is, like you said, is the fact like I've been consistent the
Mhm.
entire way through.
Mhm.
And I think that this trumps everything.
Yeah, I think some of the advanced techniques and strategies, you know, if you apply them early, maybe you get there a little bit sooner, maybe. But at the end of the day, if you're in this for the long haul, like most people are going to come close to maximizing their genetic potential with a reasonable, I think, lower than they realize amount of volume. It just may take a little bit longer, and that's even debatable depending on the situation.
Very
So,
debatable. Yeah.
And when we talk about things like that, right, the X's and the O's of bodybuilding, to do that online is exhausting. Like you were talking, Brian, about the whole internet, online, social media aspect of it. Trying to get good information, like you guys just talked about, into a format that people will actually listen to, it's got to be a 30-second caption. It's literally got to be this 20, 30-second, 40-second video. And it's exhausting to have to do that, you know? And as much as I like to talk and get that extroverted person out of me, I like doing that one-on-one in a Skype call, or even like one on maybe 10 at the local gym when people are like, oh, let's listen to what this dude has to say, you know? But I could easily just like, as much as I enjoy prepping and kind of having an audience, I don't want to have to, I could easily just do that here in my little town, you know? That's it. Because to take that information and then turn it into, like you said, Brian, good information, good applicable information in an online type of a platform, it's literally exhausting. And I could easily just prep without any social media at all. But it's kind of one of those deals where it's kind of like a necessary evil at this point. It's like you need to find ways to take that information, which is really kind of boring if you think about it, but to make it and put the effort into it to make
Yeah,
it,
make it flashy.
you know, kind of, well, you got to make it flashy, and at the same time, you got to make it good quality. You know, you can't
You're
just
trying to
just start spouting stuff and
yeah, I'm trying to give people 39 years of experience in 7 seconds or less.
and exactly, exactly, yeah, because that's the
And
literal, like, you guys,
And literally, if someone would say, "Oh, you were talking too long," like 45
yeah,
seconds, you were talking
they
too long.
will, they will. You're absolutely right. We've gotten that before, Jeff, on our collabs
I just
that
saw
we've done. It's
a
like, you guys
recent
talk too
YouTube,
long about
our
that.
last Jeff, you stuck up for me.
I did stick up for
Appreciate
you,
that,
Brian.
man.
I
Some
love
guy's
you,
like,
bro.
first guy talked too long. there's a lot to go over here.
Yeah, it's a totally different world.
Yeah.
It is a totally different
Let me
world
ask you guys
doing
this,
that.
because as far as like feeling, maybe do you guys ever feel isolated as coaches? Because we all work from home. Because I've been doing it now 15 years. Brian, you've been doing it how long now?
Right. Almost 10.
Yeah, and same with
Full-time
Brad,
for me.
15-ish. Do you guys ever get you feel isolated? Even though we're doing reports with clients, but you know, maybe do a video call with the client a day, do you still feel like you're isolated?
Yeah. Like I would like
I
some
don't-
water cooler conversation every now and then. I don't get that, you know, it's nice being
And
in
it's
the
funny,
office.
Because like I think on social media, it seems glamorous, right? Like
yes,
this guy's spitting out some 7-second content. He's shredded, and then like he trains at home. He's basically works from home. He doesn't have to commute. Like all these things. Like, oh man, this is the life. Like, is it all that, or Is there some what's the pros and cons for you guys?
I don't know that I'm isolated until I know that I'm isolated. Like, I can literally kind of work and work and work, and I love having one consultation a day because it gets that extrovert in me. It serves that personality type in me to where I can talk with a person for 90 minutes, 2 hours, sometimes 2.5 hours. I enjoy that, right? And so I think that I'm good. And it's not until I have that actual social avenue. Like, I just recently started helping out coaching the JV football team, just kind of like the beginning of September, right? And when I start getting out of my little bubble and I start interacting with these, freshmen, sophomore, junior high school kids and the other coaches, and sometimes after we're done with practice, we'll go to the gym and we'll train together. It's like, man, this feels really good. And I actually look forward to that. It's kind of like here in about an hour or so, it's like, okay, it's time to button all this up, go to practice. I don't know that I'm isolated until I know that I'm isolated. I'm actually exposed to what is normal interaction, the way that the human mind was kind of
Yeah.
designed to do.
I mean, I think I'm in the same boat there. I can have a week where, if I might run some errands, but I'm not really going out for any social reasons. But yeah, once I do, it's like, okay, if I go train with somebody and go out to eat after, it's like, wow, that was a really refreshing day, and then you realize like this is something that I've been lacking. So I actually kind of prefer to train at home, to be honest. But I recognize that it's good for me to get out of the house and go interact with other human beings in the gym. Plus, it's also just kind of fun to see, like, observe and chat with people in the gym about different things. But um, yeah, I just miss like those kind of breaks throughout the day where you're just kind of chatting with a coworker, and like heating up your lunch and spending 15 minutes talking about something completely irrelevant to what you're doing. So
Yeah.
like that's the type of stuff that I think I need every now and then. But I mean, there's a lot of pros. I mean, there's like I quit my full-time job um, and as a construction manager, right? Like it was a few months after Brewer was born. And like I'm the timing of that, it wasn't necessarily intentional for then, but I'm glad it worked out that way because like I got to see both of my kids like grow up in their early stages, like I got to see them every single day. And so while some of that, at times is exhausting, it's also, something I cherish dearly. So um yeah, definitely more pros than cons, but it isn't as glamorous, I think, as it
It's
looks
people.
like. Yeah, agreed there.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm resistant. Like, when I get in my little bubble and I'm just grinding day in, day out, delivering coaching, it kind of took a little bit of effort to get me out of the house and go coach those boys up.
Mhm,
It was kind of like I didn't really want to. I kind of dreaded it in a way,
mhm.
just because those skills aren't sharp. And I think I probably was a little bit awkward first interacting with those boys, because then there's the ego Brad that's like expecting these guys to know who I am, and it's like, and that's the kind of thing that I kind of dread in a way. But yeah, it's like I was talking about before. You don't know you're isolated until you're isolated. You're resistant to it at first, but you don't know how much you're going to enjoy it. So Jeff, you brought it up. I'm assuming that you've got perspective to share as well.
That's just my question for you guys. I don't want to. No, I'm kidding. I'll say.
Fair enough.
I would say, yeah, because prior to coaching, I worked at an auto plant on an assembly line, which was physical work. It was very boring work, and I commuted about 3.5 hours a day. So to go from that to I get to work from home with bodybuilders like all over the world, like it was amazing. And now that it's 15 years later, there are some days where I feel very isolated. Because especially my wife's at work, son's at school, the house is uber quiet, and I'm sitting at my desk for working with athletes, just doing reports. So I'm like, you're getting some interaction, but it's like you said, Brian, it's not like hey, for it's break time, I'm gonna go talk about how the Raiders just
Ooh,
got their ass kicked
Something
over the
else.
weekend, you
Mhm.
know? So it's like I need some of that. And even like I like you, bro. I know when I need something, like when I get excited about going to Walmart to get my rice cakes, I'm like, okay, this is pretty bad. Like I need to venture out more, you know. So it's like I work from home, I train from home,
Train at home.
I
Mhm.
parent from home. So it's like I spend a lot of time at home. So the weekends, it's golden when my wife says, "Hey, let's get out. Let's get out of the city. Let's venture out." It's not. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love my job. I think it's been probably as far as like work life, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me because it's freed up a lot of my time. Like you said, Brian, I got so much time for my son. Like growing up as a kid, I grew up in a divorced household. So I didn't spend a lot of time with my parents. So it's like my son has this opportunity to spend a lot of time with me. So I'm very grateful for that. But personally, it can be challenging because of the isolation. So, and it's like, the social media outlet, it really doesn't do enough for me. Like I'll, interact with some people online, but it's not the same as like that in-person engagement.
Circling back to our favorite part of coaching, the real life mentoring, right? Um, I kind of want to wrap it up maybe with this kind of thought. Our recent course that you and I did, Jeff, the macros to meals. I love the way that we laid it out with the whole robot X's and O's, like literal, you know,
The robot
macros.
was me. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, and you
No,
did a
I'm kidding.
great
I was
job of
kidding.
it.
But yeah.
And I did a little bit of roboting too when I kind of laid out the whole week-long timeline, right? But really, to be honest with you, my favorite part of making that whole course is when you and I were actually in the kitchen, like showing people how to hit their macros, how we do it, the way that I kind of at the end of the day needed to make up some protein and I need to have a real protein-rich meal. That was the best part of making the whole course, in my opinion. I really, really enjoyed
You
that
should become a chef.
because well, I would fail miserably at that.
Everything's got pumpkin
Um,
in it.
and pumpkin is a pudding, it's, but I really enjoy demonstrating in a way. That was one of the things I really enjoyed about doing the personal training on the floor was like demonstrating how to do a particular exercise, and that's the part that I really do enjoy about coaching is being able to kind of put that kind of stuff into real life. And one of the things that kind of scares me right now is that the potential there is to totally lose all of that like human interaction. And I'm going to go somewhere with this that you guys were probably not even expecting, but I have seen and heard of people say to Chat GTP or some sort of an artificial intelligence program, make me a bodybuilding program, working parts twice a week and using Eric Helms' fundamental and the muscle and strength training pyramids, like giving all this specific detail and boom, it spits out, this program. And I can almost kind of see the writing on the wall to where this sport could even become even more isolated with something like that. Especially for folks that are kind of simple-minded, and it's kinda like with me, like, you give me your orders. Jeff, you gave me orders, like, years ago that I still do to this day. When you've got a soldier that just does their business once they get their orders, I could almost see something like AI totally, like, removing social and human interaction from the sport, and it's kind of scary to think about when we are kind of made for relationship in a way.
I mean, I'm not an AI expert, but humans are social creatures. So I
That's
think
my
there's
point.
always gonna be people out there. There'll probably be some people like, yeah, why do I need a I'm not gonna pay for coaching. I'm just gonna go on that. I'm gonna type in all Eric as a reference. I'm gonna type in all these Lay Nortons of the world. I'm going to reference all these guys, and it's going to spit out the entire prep, lay it out from start to finish. And I know this has already happened because I saw someone on Instagram do this, had their peak week all set up and all that. But robot can't look at your physique and go, hey, you look soft, you look hard or whatever. So, and then there's no emotional, like you're going to need some emotional support. Where are you going to get that from? Your mom's
Yeah.
trying to
Preach, Jeff. Keep going.
feed you
You're
all
proving my
your mom's
point.
trying to feed you lasagna. She don't care about your shredded ass. So I think there's going to be, people need that social interaction. And
I
I'm
agree.
probably the most introverted out of all of us. And like as a kid, I used to sit in front of the TV on Sundays in my pajamas all day and watch football from the time it started to the time it ended, would not move. And I was fine. But even now, like I need to go to Walmart, even if
need
the
to go to
cashier, even if the
exactly.
cashier says, would you like some bags? Yes, I'll take a bag. Like I need something.
Thank you for talking to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna wear a t-shirt. Please talk to me.
No, the AI thing, I think there could be a period where people are experimenting quite a bit with that in the ways you mentioned, but I think eventually people are going to realize, okay, it's human nature to communicate with on a human level, and then maybe the pendulum swings a little bit back the other direction. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. It's crossed my mind, but anytime I've looked at, like, unless you have like a perfectly trained AI model, it's not going to capture everything that a human could. And even then, you remove the emotional component, and if AI can, develop empathy and emotional assistance, it still feels weird taking that from a robot,
A machine. Mhm.
So it's there's something that it will never replace, in my opinion.
Yeah. You guys pretty much took that right where I wanted to, because even to expand on that, like you kind of alluded to, Jeff, AI is not going to know if you're flat. AI is not going to know if you're spilled. AI is not going to know, it's not going to take into consideration that Brad was unloading 400-pound logs and splitting wood and knows to adjust the training program this way to account for that. But even like, to me, it is so foreign. It's like, okay, AI, can you go coach up those 3 linemen on how to block, on the line? To me, it's kind of similar in a way. You've got 3 linemen, one's hip dominant, one's quad dominant, one moves this way, one moves that way. There's individual coaching that's gonna come to each of those athletes for their individual, background, their needs. It seems to me it's kind of no different in bodybuilding. I mean, sure, maybe it's a great place to start, but you better get some human intelligence, some human interaction, taking in all of the context, because even the most finely tuned, AI platform, you cannot take every single bit of context in there. And you, like you said, Brian, even if you could, there's no way that machine is going to have sympathy and be able to say, oh man, I'm really sorry that your elbow's bugging you and you can't do your favorite type of curl that it is that you want to do. Let's figure out a way to fix that, or figure out a way to work around
It's like
that, that it's not going
my
to
prep
happen.
in 2019, Brad, like the last 8 or 9 weeks heading into mayhems, like I know the X's and O's. I've done so many preps. I know what I need to do with my body. I know exactly what my protocol should be, but I brought Eric in my corner so he can coach me. He didn't coach me X's and O's. He didn't say, hey, Jeff, we need to lower these calories down to this or that. It was the emotional support. He's the one to help manage my emotions while going through such an extreme process. It was like having two level heads instead of just
Mhm.
one.
Two level heads and 4 sets of eyes. I am to this day so thankful, Jeff, that with that last 5-6 weeks of my prep this year, I simply had your second set of eyes. Because I know my X's and O's and I know my body and I know what I need. But it needed you being able to say, hey, Brad, during this period of time, you need to let those post-failure partials go. Hey, Brad, your calories are great, but you need to drop your fat and increase your carbs so that we can get you feeling better. I know you're hungry, but we need to get you feeling better and getting you feeling out. I know that stuff, but I'm not going to be the one with my set of eyes, I've got my own attachments to what it is that I'm doing. I need another human, AKA my brother, my guy that loves me and wants me to go out there and just kick ass, to be able to give me that second set of eyes, that perspective, that second set of perspective, to really maximize what it is that I'm trying to do. Because I want the same thing.
Probably the most fun prep I've ever had was 2011, because it was almost all of us prepping at the same time. And that's what I'm so looking forward to next year. You guys aren't bailing, right? You guys are in.
Not planning.
Brother,
Not
right
planning
now,
on
I'm
bailing.
working
It's like-
hard just for that.
It's the connection, because it's almost like I don't need you guys to tell me, hey, Jeff, you need to lower your calories, but I mean, it could just be one word you might say, and it's like, it's uplifting. I know I'm connected with you guys. It's encouraging too. Like, oh shit, I know Brian's probably getting his steps in right now. Even though I'm not talking to Brian today, I know he's getting his steps in, and he's probably going to come with those shredded glutes. So I got to try to match up to that. But it's fun. It's encouraging. It's uplifting. So that's what I really loved about my 2011 prep, was the fact that it felt like there was a team and a togetherness to it. And bodybuilding, like, it could be very isolating for a lot of people, even though it may not appear to be that way on the outside. But a lot of people do need that connection.
Well, it brings the best out of us. Like, I literally felt like I executed my prep this year the best ever. Because there was times, Jeff, when I didn't want to practice my posing, and I was not perfect. I didn't practice my posing every single day.
Shame on you.
Full transparency. Sorry, Jeff. But of those 5 weeks, I probably practiced 4 of the 5. I maybe missed 6 or 7 days, because there was times where I didn't want to do it. But I'm like, dang it. I gotta execute. I gotta execute with excellence. I've got to get my camera up. I got to put my music on. I got to do my posing routine. I got to take the music down. I got to do my symmetry round. I got to do my muscularity round. It literally, in my opinion, that support that you're talking about, that network, it brings the best out of all of us. It makes us really bring out and achieve our full potential. And it's without that, I've just kind of gone through the motions before.
I was going
and
to ask,
it showed on stage.
when you were doing it more on your own, were you having as much fun as when I said, hey, Brad, you need to lower your calories down to 1,700?
No, and this prep was the funnest prep ever.
See?
Really, to
Because
be
a lot of
honest,
it's just
it
the
was the
connection.
funnest
So
prep
people
ever.
can say, why do you need a coach? As an advanced athlete, you'll probably hear that from people. Why you need a coach? It's just
Mhm.
that.
Yep. People ask me, Brad, why do you need a coach? You're the man. And I'm like, even the man
Yeah.
needs a man.
It makes the process a lot more enjoyable too. Like, you
Exactly.
can
Oh, for
100%.
sure.
share what you're feeling.
Yeah, it made it more fun. It brought the best out of me. I executed
I
better.
don't have nothing else to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that was,
I don't know.
I think
I'm
that
an
was,
F.
Brian, I'm going to let you take it home, because otherwise I think Jeff just did a little mic drop there.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. No, I don't have anything else to add.
No, go find a lifting buddy.
Yeah, go find a lifting buddy.
All right, you guys. That's all I got. So until next time, take care.
What's going on, everybody? Eric Helms here, Chief Science Officer of 3DMJ. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and let me just take 1 second to tell you about MASS, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport. This is a monthly research review that I do with Lauren Colenso-Semple, Eric Trexler, as well as Mike Zerdos. These are experts in their field, and we cover all the information relevant to you as an athlete or coach if you're working with strength or physique athletes, or if you're a recreational or competitive athlete yourself. We cover nutrition, training, sports psychology, and health. And we do this in written format, as well as, since you like the podcast, audio summaries, as well as video concept reviews. If you're a trainer, we also have continuing education credits for ACSM, NSCA, NASM, and ACE. So head over to 3dmusclejourney.com, click on the products tab, and you can find us there. I look forward to seeing you, and enjoy the podcast.